The film The Gods Must Be Crazy is widely remembered not only for its unique comedic storytelling and cultural contrast, but also for its remarkably distinctive cast. Unlike many mainstream productions of its era, this film blends professional actors with non-professional performers, creating an unusual balance that contributes heavily to its tone and authenticity. The careers of the main cast members are deeply tied to the film itself, with some experiencing international recognition, while others remain closely connected to their original environments and communities. One of the most iconic figures in the film is N. Zaw, who plays She, the sand bushman at the center of the story. Before the film, N. Zaw lived a traditional life in the Kalahari Desert with little to no exposure to modern monetary systems or global cinema. His casting was unconventional and largely accidental from a Western film industry perspective, as he was discovered due to his natural presence and authenticity, rather than formal acting training. N. Zaw became internationally recognizable almost overnight after the release of the film. What makes N. Zaw's career particularly unique is that he never pursued acting as a conventional profession in the Hollywood sense. After the success of The Gods Must Be Crazy, he did appear in sequels such as The Gods Must Be Crazy 2, but he remained largely outside the global entertainment industry structure. Instead, he returned to a more traditional lifestyle in his home region. His involvement in the film brought attention to his community and culture, but he himself never fully transitioned into a long-term acting career. In many ways, his presence in cinema remains a rare example of a non-professional actor achieving worldwide fame while maintaining distance from the industry that made him known. In contrast, the role of Andrew Stein, the shy and socially awkward biologist, was played by Marius Weyers, a trained South African actor with extensive experience in theater and film. Marius Weyers had already built a solid reputation in South African cinema before taking on this role. His performance in The Gods Must Be Crazy significantly expanded his international visibility. Weyers brought a grounded, understated comedic style to the character, which helped balance the more exaggerated situational humor of the film. His portrayal of Andrew Stein contributed to his recognition as a versatile actor capable of both dramatic and comedic roles. Following the success of the film, Marius Weyers continued working steadily in film, television, and theater. While he did not become a global superstar in the Hollywood sense, his career benefited from increased international attention. He went on to appear in a variety of productions, often portraying thoughtful, intellectual, or morally centered characters. The film served as a major turning point that helped introduce him to audiences outside of South Africa, establishing him as a respected figure in international character acting. Another key figure in the cast is Sandra Prinsloo, who plays Kate Thompson, the schoolteacher who becomes involved in the central storyline. Sandra Prinsloo was already an established actress in South Africa before the film. Known for her strong stage presence and emotional depth, she brought a sense of realism and warmth to her role. Her character serves as both a narrative anchor and a symbolic representation of modern society interacting with unfamiliar environments and cultures. Sandra Prinsloo's career was already well developed prior to The Gods Must Be Crazy, particularly in theater, where she had earned critical acclaim for her performances in both classical and contemporary works. After the film's success, she continued to build a strong career in acting, becoming one of South Africa's most respected performers. She worked across stage, television, and film, often taking on roles that explored complex emotional and social themes. The international exposure from the film helped broaden her audience, but she remained primarily focused on serious acting rather than commercial fame. The supporting cast includes several notable South African actors who contributed to the comedic and narrative structure of the film. These performers often played government officials, scientists, and townspeople, each adding to the contrast between modern urban life and the isolated desert world of She. While many of these actors did not achieve global fame, they were experienced professionals within the regional film industry. Their performances helped ground the film in a believable social environment, making the comedic elements more effective. The director of the film, while not part of the acting cast, also played a significant role in shaping the performances. The casting approach was intentionally diverse, blending trained actors with individuals who had little or no formal acting background. This decision created a naturalistic contrast that became one of the defining features of the film's style. The professional actors had to adapt to working alongside someone like Zaw, whose performance style was instinctive and culturally rooted rather than rehearsed. The impact of the film on the careers of its cast members varied significantly. For Zaw, it meant sudden international attention without long-term industry integration. For Marius Weyers and Sandra Prinsloo, it served as a major career milestone that expanded their visibility beyond South African cinema. Both continued to work steadily in their profession, with the film often cited as one of the most internationally recognized works. One of the most interesting aspects of the cast dynamic is how the film created a bridge between two very different worlds of performance. On one side was traditional Western acting methodology, represented by trained professionals like Weyers and Prinsloo. On the other was a lived, experiential presence of Zaw, whose performance was shaped by real-life experience rather than cinematic technique. This combination gave the film a distinctive authenticity that continues to be discussed in film studies and cultural analysis. The Gods Must Be Crazy became one of those rare films that moved far beyond entertainment and entered the realm of global cultural reference. Released in 1980, it arrived during a period when international audiences had limited exposure to Southern African cinema and even less familiarity with the Sand People and the Kalahari Desert environment. Because of this, the film was not just a comedy for many viewers, but also their first visual and narrative encounter with an entirely different way of life. This positioning gave the film an outsized cultural impact that extended far beyond what its modest production scale might suggest. At its core, the film presented a contrast between a traditional hunter-gatherer society and modern industrial civilization. This contrast resonated strongly with audiences in both developed and developing countries, though often in very different ways. In Western countries, many viewers interpret the story as a humorous critique of modern technology and social complexity. The idea that a simple glass bottle could disrupt an entire community became a widely discussed metaphor for unintended consequences of modern life. In other parts of the world, however, the film sparked more complex conversations about representation, cultural accuracy, and the portrayal of indigenous peoples in global media. One of the most significant cultural impacts of the film was how it shaped popular perceptions of the Sand People. The character She, played by Zaw, became a widely recognized image of a primitive innocence, living in harmony with nature. While this portrayal was intended to be comedic and symbolic, it also simplified and romanticized a very real and diverse group of people. Over time, scholars and cultural critics debated whether the film reinforced stereotypes or whether it provided a rare platform for visibility, even if imperfect. In global pop culture, the film became highly quotable and widely referenced. Scenes involving the bottle, the misunderstandings of modern objects, and a comedic interaction between She and urban society were frequently replayed in television clips, comedy shows, and classroom discussions about cultural difference. The film's humor translated across language barriers, making it accessible in many countries where dialogue-heavy comedies might not have succeeded. Its physical comedy style made it particularly adaptable to international audiences. In some regions, the film was even used in educational contexts as a starting point for discussions about anthropology, cultural relativism, and globalization. Teachers and lecturers sometimes use scenes to illustrate how different societies interpret objects and technology in radically different ways. While this educational use was not always aligned with the film's original comedic intent, it demonstrates how deeply it entered intellectual and cultural discourse. Politically, the film exists in a complicated space. It was produced during the apartheid era in South Africa, a historical context that inevitably shaped international perceptions of anything originating from a region at the time. Although the narrative of the film does not directly address apartheid, its production background has been analyzed in relation to South Africa's global image during that period. Some viewers saw the film as a neutral comedy that transcended politics, while others viewed it as part of a broader media landscape that often excluded or simplified African political realities. Another major aspect of its cultural significance is its longevity. Unlike many comedies that fade after their initial release period, The Gods Must Be Crazy continued to circulate globally for decades through television broadcasts, VHS tapes, DVDs, and later digital streaming platforms. Its accessibility allowed it to reach multiple generations of viewers, each interpreting it differently depending on their cultural context and historical moment. The film also contributed to a broader trend in global cinema, where fish out of water narratives became increasingly popular. While the concept existed before, this film helped solidify it as a recognizable comedic structure in which characters from vastly different cultural or technological environments interact and misunderstand each other. Many later films and television shows borrowed elements of this structure, even if indirectly. Mimetically, the film's imagery has endured. The falling bottle, the confusion over modern devices, and the calm logic as she navigating unfamiliar technology have all been reproduced in internet culture, long before and after the rise of social media. These moments became shorthand for the idea of technological misunderstanding and cultural displacement. The historical significance of the film also lies in its role as one of the first internationally successful African-produced films to reach a truly global audience. While not the first, it was among the most commercially visible, and it demonstrated that stories set in African landscapes, featuring African characters, could achieve mass appeal outside the continent. This opened discussions about global distribution and the representation of non-Western narratives in mainstream cinema. However, this success also came with criticism. Some argued that the film's global popularity depended on simplifying complex cultural realities into easily digestible comedic situations. Others pointed out that the humor often relied on contrasts that positioned modern society and traditional life in a hierarchical relationship, even if unintentionally. These debates continue to shape how the film is studied in media and cultural studies programs today. The production of The Gods Must Be Crazy is filled with unusual behind-the-scenes stories, largely because the film itself was created in an environment that was far removed from the typical Hollywood studio system. Much of the filming took place in remote desert regions of southern Africa, particularly within and around the Kalahari landscape. This environment was not a constructed set, but an expansive natural space, which meant that the production had to adapt to real-world conditions rather than control them. One of the most remarkable aspects of the production was the casting of Zaw. He was not a trained actor and had no prior experience with filmmaking. According to production accounts, he was discovered in a remote community and brought into the project due to his natural presence, communication style, and ability to embody the character or she without formal direction. This created both opportunities and challenges for the crew, as traditional acting instructions and cinematic blocking techniques had to be adapted to suit someone unfamiliar with film production conventions. Language differences also played a significant role in shaping the filming process. Zaw spoke a language that was not widely understood by the crew, and communication often required translation or simplified demonstration. This meant that many scenes were directed through physical gestures, reenactments, and visual cues rather than detailed verbal instruction. As a result, many of She's reactions and movements feel spontaneous, because they were often guided by instinct rather than scripted precision. The director, Jamie Oos, played a central role in managing this unconventional production environment. Oos was known for his ability to work with natural landscapes and non-traditional storytelling methods. In this film, he embraced unpredictability as part of the creative process. Instead of trying to eliminate the unpredictability of working with a non-actor in a remote environment, he integrated it into the style of the film. This approach contributed to the documentary, like realism that contrasts with the structured comedic narrative. Filming in the Kalahari Desert presented significant logistical challenges. The region is known for extreme temperatures, limited infrastructure, and vast distances between locations. Transporting equipment, crew, and supplies required careful planning. Unlike controlled studio environments, weather conditions could not be adjusted for production schedules. Heat, wind, and sand were constant factors that affected both filming continuity and equipment reliability. Camera equipment had to be protected from dust and heat, and sound recording was often complicated by wind interference. Despite these difficulties, the production team leaned into the natural environment rather than attempting to overly modify it. This contributed to the film's visual authenticity, as the landscape seen on screen is largely unaltered and genuinely reflects the harsh beauty of the desert setting. Another interesting behind-the-scenes element involves the interaction between professional actors and Zaw. Marius Weyers and Sandra Prinsloo, both experienced performers, had to adjust their acting style significantly. Instead of relying on tightly rehearsed dialogue exchanges, they often had to react in real time to unpredictable actions from Zaw. This created a dynamic where scenes felt more improvisational, even when they were carefully structured in terms of narrative purpose. Some scenes reportedly required multiple takes not because of mistakes in performance, but because of environmental interruptions or unexpected natural events. Animals, shifting weather, or changes in lighting sometimes altered the continuity of shots. Rather than resisting these changes, the production team often incorporated them, enhancing the sense of realism in the final film. The iconic bottle that drives much of the story also has an interesting production context. It was a deliberately simple object chosen for its universal recognizability. The idea was that it would be visually striking in a natural environment where such manufactured objects do not belong. Behind the scenes, careful attention was given how this object would be framed, dropped, and interacted with to ensure it remained the central symbolic trigger of a narrative. Stunt coordination and physical comedy sequences were also carefully managed. Although the film appears lighthearted and effortless, many of the physical interactions require coordination between actors and crew to ensure safety in remote environments. This included vehicle sequences, chase scenes, and moments involving physical misunderstandings between characters. One of the most challenging aspects of production was maintaining continuity in an environment that constantly changed. The desert landscape, while visually consistent in tone, shifts subtly with light, sand movement, and weather patterns. This meant that scenes filmed on different days could look slightly different, requiring careful attention during editing to maintain narrative cohesion. The editing process itself was crucial in shaping the final tone of the film. Because so much of the raw footage involved natural reactions and unscripted moments, the editor had to construct a coherent comedic rhythm from a large amount of variable material. Timing became one of the most important tools in transforming raw footage into structured comedy. Another behind-the-scenes aspect worth noting is the production's approach to cultural interaction. The crew spent time observing and learning from the environment and the people who live there. While the film is fictional in its narrative structure, the production drew inspiration from real observations of life in the region. This influenced both costume design and behavioral portrayal, although it remains a stylized interpretation rather than a documentary representation. The narrative structure of The Gods Must Be Crazy is deceptively simple on the surface, yet it is carefully constructed to interweave multiple storylines that converge in a meaningful and often comedic way. The film does not follow a single linear protagonist in the traditional sense. Instead, it balances parallel narratives that eventually intersect, creating a layered storytelling approach that enhances both humor and thematic depth. At the center of the story is She, played by Zaw, a member of a sand community living in the Kalahari Desert. The film begins by presenting his world as harmonious, self-sufficient, and untouched by modern civilization. This introduction is crucial because it establishes a baseline of balance and simplicity. The narrative voice describes a society as one without concepts like ownership, greed, or conflict in the way modern societies understand them. This framing sets up the central disruption that drives the plot forward. The inciting incident occurs when a glass bottle is thrown out of an airplane and lands near She's community. This moment is both literal and symbolic, as it introduces an object that does not belong to the natural order of their world. At first, the bottle is seen as useful. It becomes a tool for various everyday tasks, demonstrating how quickly an unfamiliar object can be integrated into daily life. However, as more members of the community begin to desire it, conflict arises for the first time. This marks the first major turning point in the narrative. She interprets the disruption as a sign that the gods must be unhappy, and he decides to take responsibility for restoring balance. His goal becomes to return the bottle to the edge of the world, effectively removing it from existence. This quest forms the backbone of the primary storyline, structured as a journey narrative. It is simple in motivation but rich in encounters, as she moves further away from his familiar environment and into increasingly complex and unfamiliar territory. Running parallel to She's journey is the storyline of Andrew Stein, played by Marius Weyers. Andrew is a socially awkward scientist who relocates to a remote area to work as a biologist. His narrative begins as a character-driven subplot focused on his discomfort with social interaction, particularly with women. His introduction provides a sharp tonal contrast to She's storyline, as it highlights the anxieties and insecurities present in modern society. Andrew's storyline intersects with that of Kate Thompson, played by Sandra Prinsloo, a schoolteacher who arrives in the same region. Their relationship develops awkwardly, filled with miscommunication and comedic mishaps. These scenes serve as a form of situational comedy that mirrors the misunderstandings experienced by She, but within a modern social context. The parallel is important because it suggests that confusion and misinterpretation are not exclusive to cross-cultural encounters. They also exist within the same cultural framework. A third narrative thread involves a group of guerrillas and a government conflict, which introduces an element of political tension. While this subplot is less emphasized in terms of emotional depth, it plays a structural role in bringing the main characters together. The presence of armed conflict contrasts sharply with the innocence of She's journey, reinforcing the film's thematic exploration of violence and complexity in modern society. The pacing of the film alternates between these storylines, using editing to create rhythm and contrast. She's journey is often portrayed with a calm, observational tone, while Andrew's experiences are faster-paced and filled with comedic tension. The guerrilla subplot introduces urgency and stakes, preventing the narrative from becoming too static or predictable. This balance keeps the audience engaged while gradually building toward convergence. As the film progresses, the separate storylines begin to intersect more directly. She encounters modern objects and situations that he cannot fully understand, leading to a series of comedic misunderstandings. At the same time, Andrew and Kate become entangled in the political subplot, which raises the stakes of their storyline. The convergence of these narratives represents the second major turning point, where the film shifts from parallel storytelling to integrated action. The climax of the film occurs when all the narrative threads collide. She becomes involved in the conflict between the guerrillas and the government forces, not through intention, but through circumstance. His presence in this situation highlights the absurdity of modern conflict from his perspective. What appears normal or logical to the other characters is incomprehensible to him, and this contrast is used to both comedic and philosophical effect. During the climax, Andrew is forced to act decisively, stepping out of his socially awkward persona to protect others. This marks a key moment in his character development, as he transitions from passive observer to active participant. Kate also plays a role in navigating the chaos, demonstrating resilience and adaptability. These character shifts are subtle but important, as they show growth within the framework of a comedic narrative. The resolution of the film returns to She's original goal. After experiencing the complexities and contradictions of modern society, he finally reaches a point where he can dispose of the bottle. This act restores the balance that was disrupted at the beginning of the story. The ending mirrors the opening, creating a circular narrative structure that reinforces the idea of returning to simplicity. Structurally, the film can be understood as a combination of a quest narrative, a romantic comedy, and a social satire. Each storyline contributes to the overall message while maintaining its own tone and pacing. The use of multiple protagonists allows a film to explore different perspectives without becoming overly fragmented. The narrative also relies heavily on contrast as a storytelling device. The simplicity of She's world is contrasted with the complexity of modern society. The calm pace of the desert is contrasted with the urgency of political conflict. The clarity of She's motivations is contrasted with the confusion of Andrew's social interactions. These contrasts are not just thematic but structural, shaping how the story unfolds and how the audience experiences it. The Gods Must Be Crazy may appear at first glance to be a simple comedy built around misunderstandings and physical humor, but beneath its light tone lies a complex network of themes and symbolic elements. The film uses its narrative characters and central objects to explore deeper ideas about human nature, society, and the consequences of progress. These themes are not presented in a heavy or overtly philosophical manner. Instead, they are woven subtly into the comedic structure, allowing audiences to engage with them both consciously and unconsciously. One of the most prominent themes in the film is the contrast between simplicity and complexity. She, played by Ann Zaw, represents a world that is structured around balance, shared resources, and minimal conflict. His community does not operate on ownership or competition in the same way that modern societies do. This simplicity is not portrayed as ignorance, but rather as a different kind of intelligence, one that prioritizes harmony over accumulation. When the glass bottle enters this environment, it introduces complexity in the form of desire, jealousy, and conflict. This disruption highlights how even a single object associated with modernity can alter social dynamics. The bottle itself is the most important symbol in the film. It represents multiple ideas simultaneously, making it a powerful narrative device. On a basic level, it is a piece of modern technology that does not belong in Xi's world. Symbolically, it stands for materialism, consumer culture, and the unintended consequences of industrial society. The fact that it falls from the sky gives it a divine association in Xi's interpretation, suggesting that objects from modern civilization can be perceived as gifts or curses depending on context. As the story progresses, the bottle transforms from a useful tool into a source of division, illustrating how value is often socially constructed rather than inherent. Another key theme is the idea of perspective and relativity. The film consistently shows how the same object or situation can be interpreted in completely different ways depending on cultural background. For Xi, modern objects are confusing and sometimes illogical, while for characters like Andrew Stein, played by Marius Wares, they're ordinary and expected. This contrast emphasizes that no single perspective is inherently superior. Rather, understanding is shaped by experience and environment. The humor of the film often arises from these differing interpretations, but also encourages viewers to question their own assumptions about what is considered normal. The theme of isolation versus connection is also central to the film. Xi's journey takes him from an isolated environment into a world filled with social structures, hierarchies, and interactions that are far more complex than what he is used to. At the same time, Andrew's storyline reveals a different kind of isolation, one that exists within modern society. Despite being surrounded by people, Andrew struggles with social interaction and emotional expression. His awkward attempts to connect with Kate Thompson, played by Sandra Prinsloo, highlight the paradox of modern life. Increased connectivity does not necessarily lead to meaningful relationships. Power and control are explored through both subtle and overt means. In Xi's world, power is largely absent as a formal concept. Decisions are made collectively and resources are shared. In contrast, the modern world depicted in the film is filled with structures of authority, including government forces and armed conflict. The guerrilla subplot introduces a more direct representation of power struggles, showing how control over resources and territory can lead to violence. When Xi encounters this aspect of modern society, it appears absurd and unnecessary from his perspective, reinforcing the film's critique of hierarchical systems. Another important theme is the unintended consequences of progress. The film does not outright reject modernity, but it questions whether technological advancement always leads to improvement in quality of life. The bottle is a perfect example of this idea. It is a product of industrial progress. Yet when introduced into a different context, it causes more harm than good. This theme resonates beyond the narrative, encouraging viewers to consider how innovations can have both positive and negative effects depending on how they are used and where they are introduced. The concept of innocence versus experience is also explored throughout the film. She embodies a form of innocence that is not based on naivety, but on a lack of exposure to certain aspects of human behavior. As he encounters new situations, he does not lose his innocence entirely, but he gains a broader understanding of the world. This journey can be seen as a form of experiential learning, where knowledge is acquired through direct interaction rather than formal education. In contrast, the modern characters often possess knowledge but lack clarity or simplicity in their actions, suggesting that experience does not always lead to wisdom. Nature versus civilization is another recurring theme. The film presents a natural world as balanced and self-regulating, while civilization is depicted as chaotic and often contradictory. This is not to say that the film idealizes nature without question, but it does use the contrast to highlight differences in how environments shape behavior. The desert landscape, with its vast openness and minimal resources, encourages cooperation and simplicity. Urban and political environments, on the other hand, are shown as spaces where competition and conflict are more prevalent. Symbolism is also present in the film's use of space and movement. Xi's journey toward the edge of the world can be interpreted as a symbolic quest for resolution and restoration. It represents a desire to return to a state of balance after disruption. The idea of an edge itself is symbolic, suggesting a boundary between worlds, both literal and conceptual. By attempting to cross this boundary, she engages in an act that is both physical and philosophical. The visual style of The Gods Must Be Crazy is one of its most defining characteristics, playing a crucial role in how the story is perceived and understood. Unlike many films that rely heavily on constructed sets and artificial lighting, this movie embraces a naturalistic approach that uses real environments, minimal visual manipulation, and carefully composed shots to create both authenticity and humor. The cinematography is not flashy in a conventional sense, but is highly intentional, using contrast, framing, and visual rhythm to reinforce the film's themes and narrative structure. A large portion of the film is set in the Kalahari Desert, and this location is more than just a backdrop. It functions almost like a character in its own right. The vast, open landscapes emphasize isolation, simplicity, and balance. Wide shots are frequently used to capture the scale of the environment, often placing She, played by Zaw, as a small figure within a massive natural space. This visual choice reinforces the idea that he is part of the environment rather than separate from it. The desert is not portrayed as hostile or threatening, but as a calm, consistent presence that shapes the behavior and lifestyle of those who live within it. Lighting in these scenes is largely natural, relying on sunlight rather than artificial sources. This creates a warm, earthy color palette dominated by tones of sand, sky, and natural vegetation. The absence of heavy color grading gives the film a grounded, almost documentary-like appearance. This visual realism contrasts sharply with the exaggerated situations that occur within the story, making the humor feel more organic and believable. In contrast to the desert scenes, the sequences set in modern environments, such as towns, roads, and government facilities, are framed in a more structured and sometimes chaotic manner. The camera work in these scenes often includes tighter framing, more rapid cuts, and a greater sense of visual clutter. This stylistic shift mirrors a thematic contrast between simplicity and complexity. Where the desert feels open and balanced, the modern world appears crowded and disordered. Framing plays a significant role in how characters are presented. She is often shown in full-body shots within wide landscapes, emphasizing his connection to the environment and his physical awareness of space. Meanwhile, characters like Andrew Stein, played by Marius Weyers, are frequently framed in medium or close-up shots, especially during moments of social discomfort. These tighter frames highlight his internal tension and awkwardness, visually reinforcing his character traits without relying solely on dialogue. The film also makes effective use of visual juxtaposition. By placing elements of modern technology within natural settings, the cinematography highlights their incongruity. The glass bottle, for example, is often framed in a way that draws attention to its artificial nature. Its smooth, reflective surface contrasts with the rough textures of the desert, making it stand out visually even when it is not the central focus of the scene. This contrast reinforces its symbolic role as an object that does not belong. Camera movement is generally restrained, with many scenes relying on static or gently panning shots. This approach allows the audience to observe the action without distraction, which is particularly important for the film's physical comedy. Instead of using rapid camera movements to create excitement, the film often lets the humor unfold within a stable frame. This technique is reminiscent of classic silent film comedy, where timing and composition are more important than dynamic camera work. Physical comedy sequences are carefully staged to maximize visual clarity. Actions are often shown in wide shots so that the audience can see the full context of what is happening. This is especially important in scenes where misunderstandings occur, as the humor depends on the viewer's ability to see both the intention and the outcome simultaneously. The cinematography ensures that these moments are easy to follow, even without dialogue. Another notable aspect of the film's visual style is its use of perspective to create humor. Objects and situations are often shown from She's point of view, allowing the audience to experience his confusion and curiosity. For example, when he encounters vehicles or weapons, the camera may linger on these objects in a way that emphasizes their unfamiliarity. This perspective-based approach helps the audience understand his reactions without needing explicit explanation. The editing style complements the cinematography by maintaining a steady rhythm that balances the different narrative threads. Transitions between scenes are often straightforward, allowing the visual contrast between environments to speak for itself. The pacing of cuts is carefully controlled to support comedic timing, with pauses and reactions given enough space to land effectively. Visual motifs also play a role in reinforcing the film's themes. The recurring image of open sky, for instance, is associated with freedom, simplicity, and the idea of a natural order. In contrast, enclosed spaces, such as vehicles, buildings, or areas of conflict, are associated with restriction and complexity. These visual patterns are not explicitly stated, but become noticeable over the course of the film, contributing to its overall coherence. The use of props is another important visual element. The bottle, as the central object, is consistently framed in a way that keeps it visually prominent without overwhelming the scene. Its placement within the frame often signals shifts in the narrative, such as moments of conflict or decision. Other objects like tools or weapons are also used visually to indicate differences between cultures and environments. Sandra Prinsloo's character, Kate Thompson, is often framed in a way that emphasizes her role as a bridge between worlds. Sandra Prinsloo is frequently shown interacting with both natural and modern elements, visually positioning her between the simplicity of She's world and the complexity of Andrew's. This subtle use of framing supports her narrative function without requiring explicit exposition. The sound design and musical composition of the gods must be crazy play a subtle but essential role in shaping the film's tone, pacing, and emotional impact. Unlike many films that rely heavily on dramatic orchestral scores or highly recognizable musical themes, this film uses sound in a restrained and purposeful way. The result is an audio landscape that complements the visual storytelling rather than overwhelming it, allowing the humor, environment, and cultural contrast to remain at the forefront. One of the most distinctive aspects of the film's soundtrack is its minimalism. Music is not constantly present. Instead, it is used selectively to highlight specific moments, transitions, or emotional beats. This restraint allows natural sounds, such as wind, footsteps, animal calls, and ambient environmental noise, to become more prominent. In scenes set in the Kalahari Desert, this approach creates a sense of realism and immersion. The audience is not guided by heavy musical cues, but instead experiences the environment in a way that feels immediate and authentic. The natural soundscape of the desert is carefully captured and integrated into the film. Wind moving across open land, the crunch of sand underfoot, and distant animal noises all contribute to a feeling of space and stillness. These sounds reinforce the theme of simplicity and balance that define She's world. Silence, or near silence, is also used effectively. By reducing background noise in certain moments, the film draws attention to small actions or reactions, enhancing both tension and humor. In contrast, scenes set in more modern environments feature a denser and more layered sound design. Vehicles, machinery, human chatter, and urban noise create a sense of complexity and constant activity. This auditory contrast mirrors the visual and thematic differences between the two worlds presented in the film. Where She's environment feels calm and spacious, the modern world feels busy and sometimes overwhelming. Music in the film often carries a light, playful tone, supporting the comedic elements without becoming intrusive. The score frequently uses simple melodies and rhythmic patterns that align with the film's pacing. Rather than directing the audience's emotions in an obvious way, the music gently reinforces the mood of each scene. For example, during moments of misunderstanding or physical comedy, the music may adopt a slightly whimsical quality, enhancing the humor without distracting from the action. An important element of the film's sound design is its use of timing. Comedy often depends on precise timing, and sound plays a crucial role in achieving this. Pauses, sudden noises, and carefully placed sound effects all contribute to the effectiveness of comedic moments. For instance, when an object is dropped, mishandled, or misinterpreted, the accompanying sound can amplify the humor by emphasizing the unexpected nature of the event. The character of She, portrayed by Zaw, is closely tied to the film's natural soundscape. His movements and interactions are often accompanied by subtle environmental sounds rather than musical cues. This reinforces his connection to the natural world and distinguishes his presence from more musically accompanied scenes involving modern characters. His vocalizations and speech patterns also contribute to the sound design, adding an additional layer of authenticity and cultural specificity. Dialogue in the film is used in a unique way, often supported by narration. The narrator provides context, explanation, and sometimes ironic commentary on the events unfolding on screen. This narration becomes a key part of the film's audio identity, guiding the audience through the story while maintaining a light, humorous tone. The narrator's voice is calm and measured, contrasting with the sometimes chaotic situations depicted visually. For characters like Andrew Stein, played by Marius Weyers, sound is used to emphasize internal tension and awkwardness. Moments of silence or hesitation in dialogue are often left unfilled, allowing the discomfort of the situation to become part of the comedic effect. Small sounds, such as nervous movements, accidental noises, or environmental interruptions, are amplified in these moments, drawing attention to the character's unease. Similarly, Kate Thompson, portrayed by Sandra Prinsloo, is often associated with clearer and more structured dialogue scenes. Her interactions help anchor the narrative, and the sound design in these moments tends to be more balanced and less chaotic. This reflects her role as a stabilizing presence within the story. The film also uses sound to highlight the unfamiliarity of modern objects from She's perspective. When he encounters items like vehicles or weapons, the sounds associated with these objects are often emphasized or presented in a way that makes them seem unusual or even absurd. This technique allows the audience to experience these objects through She's perspective, transforming ordinary sounds into sources of curiosity or confusion. Another notable aspect is the absence of exaggerated or artificial sound effects. Unlike some comedies that rely on over-the-top audio cues, this film keeps its sound effects grounded in reality. This choice aligns with the overall naturalistic style of the film and ensures that the humor remains rooted in situation and context rather than audio exaggeration. The pacing of the film is also influenced by its sound design. Transitions between scenes are often accompanied by subtle audio changes rather than dramatic musical shifts. This creates a smooth flow that supports the interweaving of multiple storylines. The audience is guided from one environment to another not just visually, but through changes in sound texture and density. When The Gods Must Be Crazy was first released in 1980, its reception was both surprising and complex. What began as a modest production from Southern Africa quickly grew into an international success, reaching audiences far beyond what its creators initially anticipated. The film's blend of physical comedy, cultural contrast, and simple storytelling made it highly accessible, allowing it to perform well in a wide range of markets. However, alongside its popularity came a wave of critical discussion that examined not only its humor, but also its deeper implications. From a commercial standpoint, the film was a major success. It performed exceptionally well in countries across Europe, Asia, and North America, often exceeding expectations for a non-Hollywood production. Its universal humor played a key role in this success. Because much of the comedy relied on visual gags and situational misunderstandings rather than complex dialogue, the film was easily understood by audiences who spoke different languages. This gave it a rare level of global reach for its time. Audience reactions were generally positive, especially among viewers looking for light-hearted entertainment. Many people found the film refreshing because it offered a different perspective from mainstream Western cinema. The character She, portrayed by N. Zaw, became particularly removed non-English, popular due to his calm demeanor and logical approach to unfamiliar situations. Viewers often described his journey as both humorous and thought-provoking, even if they did not engage deeply with the film's more complex themes. Critics, however, were more divided in their responses. Some praised the film for its originality and its ability to blend comedy with social commentary. They highlighted its clever use of contrast between traditional and modern societies, as well as its effective use of visual storytelling. Others appreciated the film's pacing and structure, noting how it balanced multiple storylines without becoming confusing or overly complicated. At the same time, a number of critics raised concerns about the film's portrayal of indigenous people and African cultures. One of the central criticisms was that the film simplified or romanticized the lifestyle of the San people, presenting them as isolated from modern realities in a way that did not fully reflect historical and social complexities. While the character of She is portrayed with dignity and intelligence, some argue that the narrative still relied on a form of cultural idealization that could reinforce stereotypes. Another area of criticism focused on the film's production context. Created during the apartheid era in South Africa, the film was inevitably viewed through a political lens by some international critics. Although the story itself does not directly address apartheid, its origin led to questions about how it fit within the broader cultural and political environment of the time. Some critics felt that the film's global success risked overshadowing more urgent and serious narratives coming out of the region. Despite these criticisms, many viewers and reviewers acknowledged that the film did not present its ideas in a malicious or overtly political way. Instead, it approached its subject matter through humor and exaggeration, which made its tone feel more observational than judgmental. This ambiguity contributed to the wide range of interpretations that emerged in different cultural contexts. The performances of the cast were generally well received. Marius Weyers was praised for his portrayal of Andrew Stein, particularly for his ability to convey awkwardness and vulnerability in a comedic framework. His performance was often described as relatable, providing a point of connection for audiences more familiar with modern social dynamics. Similarly, Sandra Prinsloo received positive feedback for her role as Kate Thompson, with critics noting her ability to bring warmth and stability to the narrative. And Zaw's performance stood out as one of the most discussed elements of the film. Many critics and audiences were impressed by his natural screen presence, especially given his lack of formal acting experience. His portrayal of She was often described as authentic and engaging, contributing significantly to the film's charm. However, his casting also became part of the broader discussion about representation, with some questioning how his role was framed within the narrative. Over time, the film's reputation has evolved. While it remains widely removed non-English, popular and frequently recommended as a classic comedy, modern audiences often approach it with more critical perspective. Contemporary viewers are more likely to consider issues of representation, cultural sensitivity, and historical context when evaluating the film. This has led to a more nuanced reception, where appreciation for its humor is balanced with awareness of its limitations. The film did not receive major international awards in a way that some larger productions did, but its success is often measured by its longevity and cultural reach rather than formal recognition. It became one of the most internationally successful films to come out of its region, and its influence extended into both popular culture and academic discussion. In addition to critical reviews, the film generated significant word-of-mouth promotion. Audiences often recommended it to others, contributing to its sustained popularity over time. This organic spread was particularly important in an era before digital streaming, where films relied heavily on theatrical runs and home video distribution to reach new viewers. The legacy of The Gods Must Be Crazy extends far beyond its original release, cementing its place as one of the most recognizable international comedies of its time. While many films achieve short-term popularity and then fade, this one has maintained a lasting presence in global cinema, continuing to be referenced, studied, and rediscovered by new audiences decades after its debut. Its influence can be seen not only in filmmaking, but also in broader discussions about culture, storytelling, and the way humor can bridge different worlds. One of the most immediate signs of its lasting impact was the creation of sequels. The success of the original film led to The Gods Must Be Crazy 2, which brought back in Zaw in the role of She. This sequel continued the narrative style of cross-cultural encounters, further expanding the character's journey into new environments. Although the sequel did not achieve the same level of critical attention as the original, it reinforced the popularity of the central concept and demonstrated that audiences were still interested in this type of storytelling. Beyond the official sequel, the film also inspired a series of unofficial follow-ups and loosely connected films that adopted similar titles and themes, particularly in Asian markets. These films often used a recognizable name to attract audiences, even though they were not directly connected to the original story or production team. This phenomenon highlights the strength of the film's brand identity and its ability to resonate across different cultural contexts. In terms of cinematic influence, The Gods Must Be Crazy helped popularize a specific type of narrative built around cultural contrast and misunderstanding. While this concept existed before, the film brought it to a wider audience in a way that was both accessible and commercially successful. Later films and television shows often explored similar themes, placing characters in unfamiliar environments and using humor to explore differences in perspective. The idea of a character navigating a world they do not understand has since become a common storytelling device in global entertainment. The film also influenced how international audiences viewed African cinema. At a time when films from a continent rarely achieved global distribution, The Gods Must Be Crazy demonstrated that stories set in African environments could reach mainstream audiences worldwide. While it did not fully represent the diversity of African filmmaking, it opened doors for greater curiosity and interest in films from the region. This contributed, in part, to a gradual expansion of international film markets and the inclusion of more diverse voices in global cinema. Academically, the film has become a frequent subject of analysis in fields such as film studies, cultural studies, and anthropology. Scholars often examine it as an example of how cinema represents cultural difference and how humor can both reveal and obscure deeper social dynamics. The character she is frequently discussed in relation to ideas about the outsider perspective, where an unfamiliar viewpoint is used to critique or question established norms. This academic interest has helped sustain the film's relevance even as its original context becomes more distant in time. The legacy of the film is also tied to its themes, particularly its commentary on modernity and materialism. The image of the glass bottle as a disruptive force has become a lasting symbol that continues to resonate in discussions about technology and consumer culture. Even in contemporary contexts, where technology is far more advanced, the basic idea remains relevant, that objects and innovations can have unintended consequences when introduced into different environments or social systems. The performances of the cast have also contributed to the film's enduring influence. Marius Weyers and Sandra Prinsloo are often remembered for their roles in the film, which remain among their most internationally recognized works. Their performances help ground the story in relatable human experiences, making the more unusual elements of the narrative easier for audiences to engage with. And Zaw's role, in particular, has had a unique legacy. His portrayal of She became iconic, representing a character who is both humorous and thoughtful, simple yet perceptive. While his acting career remained limited, his impact on global audiences was significant. He became a symbol of the film's central message, and his performance continues to be one of the most memorable aspects of the story. In popular culture, the film's imagery and concepts have been referenced in various forms of media. Scenes involving the bottle, misunderstandings of modern technology, and the calm logic of she have been echoed in comedic sketches, advertisements, and even educational materials. These references often rely on the audience's familiarity with the original film, demonstrating how deeply it has embedded itself in collective memory. The film's influence can also be seen in the way it approaches storytelling. Its use of narration, combined with visual comedy and multiple intersecting storylines, has inspired filmmakers to experiment with similar structures. The balance between simplicity and complexity in its narrative design serves as a model for how films can be both entertaining and thought-provoking without becoming overly complicated. However, the legacy of the Gods Must Be Crazy is not without its complexities. As discussions around representation and cultural sensitivity have evolved, the film has been re-examined through a more critical lens. While it is still appreciated for its humor and originality, modern audiences are more likely to question certain aspects of its portrayal of indigenous life. This ongoing reassessment is part of what keeps the film relevant, as it continues to generate conversation rather than remaining static. Another important aspect of its legacy is its accessibility. The film has been distributed across multiple formats over the years, from theatrical releases to home video and digital platforms. This availability has allowed it to reach new generations of viewers, each bringing their own perspectives to its interpretation. As a result, its influence is not confined to a single era, but continues to evolve over time. The way audiences have reflected on and interpreted The Gods Must Be Crazy has evolved significantly over time, shaped by cultural background, historical context, and generational perspective. Unlike films that deliver a single clear message, this movie invites a wide range of emotional and intellectual responses. For some viewers, it is simply a light-hearted comedy filled with clever visual humor. For others, it becomes a deeper reflection on society, human behavior, and the nature of progress. This flexibility in interpretation is one of the reasons the film has remained relevant across decades. When the film was first released, many audiences experienced it primarily as a refreshing and unusual comedy. The character She, played by Zaw, was central to this reaction. His calm, logical approach to unfamiliar situations created a form of humor that felt different from typical Western comedic styles. Viewers often found themselves laughing not at him, but at the situations that arose when two completely different worlds collided. This distinction is important because it shaped how audiences emotionally connected with the character, rather than being seen as a figure of ridicule. She was often perceived as the most sensible person in the story. For many people, especially those in highly industrialized societies, the film prompted a sense of self-reflection. The introduction of the glass bottle into Xi's community became a symbolic moment that resonated with audiences who were familiar with the complexities of modern life. Viewers began to question the role of material possessions, competition, and technological dependence in their own lives. The idea that something as simple as a bottle could create conflict in an otherwise peaceful community led some to reconsider what they considered essential or valuable. At the same time, the film also generated a sense of curiosity about different ways of living. Audiences who had little exposure to cultures depicted in the film were introduced to a lifestyle that appeared radically different from their own. For some, this sparked genuine interest and a desire to learn more about the Sand people and similar communities. For others, it reinforced a simplified or romanticized view of life outside modern society. These differing reactions highlight how audience interpretation can vary widely depending on prior knowledge and perspective. The character of Andrew Stein, portrayed by Marius Weyers, provided another point of connection for audiences. His social awkwardness and difficulty in expressing himself resonated with viewers who saw aspects of their own experiences reflected in his behavior. While his situations are often exaggerated for comedic effect, the underlying emotions, nervousness, self-doubt, and the desire for connection, are universal. This made his character relatable, even as the film placed him in increasingly absurd scenarios. Similarly, Kate Thompson, played by Sandra Prinsloo, was often interpreted as a stabilizing presence within the narrative. Audiences frequently viewed her as a character who could navigate both the simplicity of Xi's world and the complexity of modern society. Her role allowed viewers to see how understanding and empathy could bridge cultural differences, even when misunderstandings occurred. As the film reached different regions around the world, audience interpretations began to diverge more noticeably. In some cultures, the film was embraced primarily for its humor and storytelling, with less emphasis on its deeper themes. In others, viewers engaged more critically with its portrayal of cultural difference and its underlying assumptions. These varied interpretations demonstrate how meaning is not fixed within the film itself, but is shaped by the audience's cultural context. Over time, as global awareness of cultural representation increased, newer generations began to approach the film with a more analytical perspective. While still appreciating its humor, many modern viewers also question how the film portrays indigenous life and whether it oversimplifies complex realities. This shift does not necessarily diminish enjoyment of the film, but adds an additional layer of interpretation. Audiences today are more likely to hold multiple perspectives at once, finding the film entertaining while also recognizing its limitations. Emotionally, the film tends to evoke a mixture of amusement and contemplation. The humor creates an immediate sense of enjoyment, but the underlying themes often linger after the viewing experience. Many viewers report thinking about the film long after it ends, particularly the idea of returning the bottle to the edge of the world. This concept is often interpreted as a metaphor for letting go of unnecessary complications or restoring balance in one's life. The generational aspect of audience reflection is also significant. Older viewers who first encountered the film during its original release often remember it as a groundbreaking and highly original experience. For them, it may carry a sense of nostalgia, representing a time when global cinema felt less interconnected and more surprising. Younger audiences, on the other hand, may approach the film with different expectations, shaped by exposure to a wider range of international media. Their interpretations are often more layered, combining appreciation with critical awareness. Another important aspect of audience reflection is the role of humor in shaping perception. Because the film presents its ideas through comedy, viewers may initially engage with it on a surface level. However, humor can also serve as a gateway to deeper understanding. By making audiences laugh, the film lowers barriers to engagement, allowing more complex ideas to be introduced without resistance. This dual function of humor, as both entertainment and insight, contributes to the film's lasting impact. The film also encourages viewers to consider the idea of normality. By presenting familiar objects and behaviors from an unfamiliar perspective, it challenges the assumption that one way of life is inherently standard or superior. This can lead to a shift in how audiences perceive their own habits and societal structures. The realization that what is considered normal in one context may appear strange in another is a powerful takeaway that resonates across different cultures. Character development in The Gods Must Be Crazy is subtle, unconventional, and deeply tied to the film's thematic structure. Unlike traditional narratives that rely on dramatic transformations or clearly defined emotional breakthroughs, this film presents character growth in a more understated and observational way. The arcs are shaped not only by internal change, but also by how characters respond to unfamiliar environments and situations. Each major character represents a different perspective on the world, and their journeys contribute to the film's exploration of culture, identity, and human behavior. The most central character arc belongs to She, portrayed by N. Zaw. At the beginning of the film, She exists in a state of harmony with his environment and community. His worldview is simple, balanced, and guided by shared values rather than individual desire. When the glass bottle enters his world, it disrupts this balance, introducing conflict for the first time. She's decision to take the bottle to the edge of the world is not driven by personal ambition, but by a sense of responsibility to restore harmony. What makes She's arc unique is that it is not about becoming someone new, but about preserving what already exists. His journey exposes him to the complexities of modern society, including technology, conflict, and social structures that are entirely foreign to him. Despite these experiences, he does not adopt these elements into his identity. Instead, he remains consistent in his values, using his perspective to navigate situations that others find confusing or chaotic. His growth lies in his expanded understanding of the world, rather than a change in who he is. She's encounters with modern objects and systems often highlight his adaptability. He approaches each new situation with curiosity rather than fear, attempting to make sense of unfamiliar concepts through his own logic. This creates both comedic moments and deeper insights, as his interpretations often reveal the absurdity of things that modern characters take for granted. By the end of the film, She completes his mission and returns to a state of balance, but with a broader awareness of the world beyond his community. His arc is circular rather than linear, emphasizing restoration rather than transformation. In contrast, Andrew Stein, played by Marius Weyers, undergoes a more traditional character development arc. At the start of the film, Andrew is defined by his social awkwardness and lack of confidence. He struggles with basic interactions, particularly when it comes to expressing himself around others. His discomfort is not limited to specific situations, but appears to be a fundamental aspect of his personality. As the story progresses, Andrew is placed in increasingly challenging circumstances that force him to act outside his comfort zone. His interactions with Kate Thompson become a central part of his development. Initially, these interactions are marked by miscommunication and embarrassment, but over time, they evolve into a more genuine connection. Through these experiences, Andrew begins to develop confidence, not by becoming a completely different person, but by learning to navigate his own limitations. The turning point in Andrew's arc occurs during the film's more intense moments, particularly when he is faced with situations that require decisive action. In these moments, his intellectual nature and moral clarity come to the forefront. He is no longer simply reacting to events, but actively shaping them. This shift represents a form of growth that is both personal and situational. By the end of the film, Andrew is still recognizably the same person, but he has gained a greater sense of agency and self-assurance. Kate Thompson, portrayed by Sandra Prinsloo, serves as a stabilizing force within the narrative, and her character arc is more subtle but equally important. From the beginning, Kate is presented as competent, compassionate, and adaptable. Unlike Andrew, she does not struggle with social interaction, and unlike she is already familiar with modern society. Her role is to bridge the gap between these two worlds, providing a point of connection that helps the narrative flow. Kate's development is less about personal transformation and more about her responses to the situations around her. As she becomes more involved in the unfolding events, she demonstrates resilience and resourcefulness. Her interactions with Andrew help facilitate his growth, while her presence in the broader narrative helps maintain a sense of balance. She does not undergo a dramatic change, but her consistency and strength make her an essential part of the story's emotional structure. The supporting characters, while not as deeply developed, contribute to the overall narrative by representing different aspects of modern society. Government officials, guerrillas, and other figures are often portrayed in a more exaggerated or functional manner. Their primary role is to create situations that challenge the main characters, particularly she and Andrew. Through these interactions, the film explores themes of authority, conflict, and misunderstanding. One of the most interesting aspects of character development in the film is how it is influenced by environment. She's behavior is shaped by the desert and his community, while Andrew and Kate are influenced by the structures and expectations of modern society. When these characters move outside their usual environments, their behavior changes in response. This highlights the idea that identity is not fixed, but is influenced by context and experience. Relationships also play a key role in character development. The evolving connection between Andrew and Kate provides a human anchor for the story, offering moments of emotional depth within the comedic framework. Their relationship develops gradually, reflecting the film's overall pacing and tone. It is not driven by dramatic declarations, but by small interactions and shared experiences. The interaction between she and the modern characters is another important dynamic. While they do not share a common language or cultural framework, their encounters reveal a form of mutual influence. She's presence challenges the assumptions of the modern characters, while their world expands his understanding of human behavior. This exchange is not symmetrical, but it is meaningful in how it shapes the narrative. The costume and set design in The Gods Must Be Crazy are essential elements that quietly but effectively support the film's storytelling, themes, and character development. While the film does not rely on elaborate or extravagant visual design, its approach is deeply intentional. Every costume choice and environmental detail contributes to the contrast between worlds, helping the audience immediately understand differences in culture, lifestyle, and social structure without the need for explicit explanation. One of the most striking aspects of the film's design is its use of real locations instead of constructed sets. Much of the story takes place in the Kalahari Desert, and this environment serves as a natural set that requires minimal alteration. The landscape itself, open, expansive, and largely untouched, communicates a sense of simplicity and balance. There are no artificial structures or decorative elements in She's world, and this absence becomes a key part of the visual storytelling. She, played by N. Zaw, is dressed in clothing that reflects the traditional lifestyle of his community. His costume is minimal, practical, and directly connected to the environment. It is designed for survival rather than appearance, using materials that blend with the natural surroundings. This choice reinforces his connection to nature and emphasizes the theme of harmony between humans and their environment. There is no sense of fashion or status in his clothing. It serves a purely functional purpose. The simplicity of She's costume also contrasts sharply with the clothing worn by characters in modern society. Andrew Stein, portrayed by Marius Weyers, is typically seen in practical but distinctly modern attire. His clothing reflects his role as a scientist, often including neutral tones, structured garments, and items associated with professional or academic environments. However, his wardrobe also contributes to his characterization. His clothes sometimes appear slightly mismatched or awkwardly worn, subtly reinforcing his lack of social confidence and his discomfort in certain situations. Kate Thompson, played by Sandra Prinsloo, is dressed in a way that reflects both professionalism and adaptability. Her clothing is more polished than Andrew's, often suggesting a sense of organization and confidence. At the same time, her wardrobe is practical enough to suit the rural setting in which much of the story takes place. This balance in her costume design mirrors her role in the narrative as someone who can navigate both structured and unstructured environments with relative ease. The contrast between traditional and modern clothing is one of the film's most effective visual tools. It allows the audience to instantly recognize the differences between characters and their respective worlds. When she encounters modern characters, the difference in attire becomes a visual representation of cultural distance. This contrast is not exaggerated for spectacle, but presented in a straightforward way that feels natural within the context of the story. Set design in the modern portions of the film further emphasizes this contrast. Buildings, vehicles, and interior spaces are more structured and defined, often filled with objects that indicate organization, ownership, and hierarchy. Offices, schools, and government facilities are arranged in a way that reflects systems of control and order. These environments are visually more complex than the open desert, filled with lines, boundaries, and man-made materials. In contrast, Xi's environment lacks these rigid structures. The absence of buildings and permanent settlements creates a sense of freedom and fluidity. Space is not divided into rooms or categories. It is open and shared. This difference in spatial design reinforces the film's exploration of how environment shapes behavior. In the desert, movement is unrestricted and interactions are direct. In modern settings, movement is guided by pathways, doors, and social rules. Props also play a crucial role in both costume and set design. The most important prop, the glass bottle, is a perfect example of how a single object can carry both narrative and symbolic weight. Its design is simple, but its appearance in the natural environment makes it stand out immediately. The bottle's smooth, manufactured surface contrasts with the textures of the desert, making it visually distinct even when it is not the focus of attention. Other props in the film further highlight the differences between cultures. Tools used by Xi and his community are simple and functional, often handmade or adapted from natural materials. In contrast, modern tools and devices are more specialized and complex, designed for specific purposes. When these objects are placed side by side, the contrast becomes clear without the need for dialogue. Costume design also reflects social roles and hierarchy within the modern world. Uniforms, formal wear, and professional clothing indicate authority, occupation, and status. Government officials and military figures, for example, are dressed in a way that clearly communicates their position within a structured system. This visual coding allows the audience to quickly understand relationships between characters and the power dynamics at play. Makeup in the film is minimal, particularly for characters in the natural environment. This choice supports the film's overall realism and avoids drawing attention away from performances. For modern characters, makeup is slightly more noticeable but still restrained, maintaining a consistent visual tone throughout the film. Another important aspect of the design is how costumes and sets interact with movement. Xi's clothing allows for freedom of motion, which is essential for his physical interactions with the environment. His ability to move easily across the landscape is visually reinforced by the simplicity of his attire. In contrast, modern clothing can sometimes restrict movement or create awkwardness, particularly in comedic situations involving Andrew. This subtle difference adds another layer to the film's physical storytelling. The integration of costume and set design with the film's themes is particularly effective. The simplicity of Xi's world is not just described in dialogue, but shown through every visual element. The complexity of modern society is similarly reflected in the density and structure of its environments. This visual consistency helps reinforce the film's message without making it feel forced or overly explicit. The screenplay of The Gods Must Be Crazy stands out for its unconventional approach to dialogue and narrative delivery. Unlike many films that rely heavily on spoken interaction to drive the story forward, this film uses a combination of minimal dialogue, visual storytelling, and narration to create a unique and effective script. The writing is structured in a way that allows humor, character development, and thematic exploration to emerge naturally, often without the need for extensive verbal explanation. One of the most distinctive features of the script is its reliance on narration. The narrator plays a central role in guiding the audience through the story, providing context, background information, and occasional commentary on the events unfolding on screen. This narrative voice is calm, observational, and often subtly ironic. It helps bridge the gap between different cultural perspectives, particularly when explaining the lifestyle and worldview of Xi, played by An Zhaw. The use of narration allows the film to communicate complex ideas in a simple and accessible way. Instead of relying on characters to explain their thoughts and motivations through dialogue, the narrator provides insight directly to the audience. This approach is especially effective in the early parts of the film, where the audience is introduced to Xi's community and way of life. The narration establishes tone and context quickly, allowing the story to move forward without lengthy conversations. Dialogue in the film is often sparse, particularly in scenes involving Xi. His communication style is rooted in his cultural background and is not structured around the conventions of modern cinematic dialogue. As a result, much of his character is expressed through actions, expressions, and interactions with the environment rather than spoken words. This reliance on nonverbal communication aligns with the film's emphasis on visual comedy and universal storytelling. In contrast, characters from modern society engage in more traditional dialogue. But even here, the script avoids overly complex or dense exchanges. Conversations are generally straightforward, reflecting everyday speech patterns rather than heightened or theatrical language. This simplicity helps maintain the film's grounded tone and ensures that the dialogue does not overshadow the visual elements of the story. The character of Andrew Stein, portrayed by Marius Weyers, provides some of the most memorable examples of how dialogue is used for comedic effect. His awkwardness is often expressed through hesitant speech, incomplete sentences, and poorly timed remarks. The script uses pauses, interruptions, and misunderstandings to create humor, allowing the audience to feel the discomfort of his interactions. These moments are carefully written to balance realism with exaggeration, making them both relatable and amusing. Kate Thompson, played by Sandra Prinsloo, serves as a contrast to Andrew in terms of dialogue. Her speech is more confident and direct, reflecting her character's composure and clarity. The interactions between Kate and Andrew are particularly important in the script, as they combine humor with character development. Their conversations often highlight differences in personality and communication style, contributing to both the romantic and comedic elements of the film. The script also makes effective use of situational humor, where the context of a scene creates comedy without the need for elaborate dialogue. Many of the film's most memorable moments involve misunderstandings that arise from cultural differences or unfamiliarity with objects. In these cases, the dialogue is minimal or even absent, allowing the situation itself to carry the humor. This approach ensures that the comedy remains accessible to a wide audience, regardless of language or cultural background. Another important aspect of the script is its pacing. Dialogue is carefully distributed throughout the film, with periods of conversation balanced by stretches of visual storytelling. This rhythm prevents the film from feeling overly talkative or overly silent. Instead, it creates a dynamic flow that keeps the audience engaged while allowing different elements of the story to take focus at different times. The screenplay also demonstrates a strong sense of structure, even though it may appear loose or episodic at first glance. The interweaving of multiple storylines requires careful planning to ensure that each thread progresses in a coherent way. Dialogue plays a key role in connecting these threads, providing transitions and points of intersection between different characters and events. Humor in the script is often derived from contrast, both in dialogue and in situation. Characters interpret the same events in different ways, leading to comedic misunderstandings. The script does not rely heavily on wordplay or complex jokes. Instead, it focuses on the logic of each character's perspective. This makes the humor feel organic and grounded, as it arises naturally from the characters' interactions with their environment. The language used in the film is also notable for its accessibility. Even when dealing with complex themes such as cultural difference or the impact of modernity, the script avoids technical or abstract terminology. This ensures that the film remains approachable for a wide audience, while still offering depth for those who wish to explore its underlying ideas. Another strength of the screenplay is its ability to convey emotion without relying on dramatic dialogue. Moments of tension, connection, or realization are often expressed through actions and reactions rather than words. This restraint allows the audience to interpret these moments in their own way, creating a more personal viewing experience. The narrator's role in delivering subtle humor should not be overlooked. The commentary often includes understated observations that add an additional layer of comedy. These lines are written in a way that feels informative rather than overtly comedic, but their placement and phrasing create a gentle, ironic tone that enhances the overall experience. The marketing and promotion of The Gods Must Be Crazy is a fascinating case study in how an unusual, low to mid-budget international film can become a global success largely through timing, word of mouth, and strategic distribution rather than modern digital campaigns. Released in 1980, the film entered a media landscape very different from today's environment, where trailers, television spots, print advertising, and international film distributors played a far more central role in shaping audience awareness. At its core, the film's marketing appeal was built around a simple but highly effective idea: a humorous story about a clash between a traditional desert community and modern civilization. This concept was easy to communicate in promotional materials, which often emphasize a visual comedy and the striking contrast between worlds. Posters and trailers typically highlighted the character of She, played by N. Zaw, alongside scenes of modern life gone wrong, creating an immediate sense of curiosity and humor without requiring complex explanation. One of the most important aspects of the film's promotional strategy was its international distribution. Rather than being confined to a single region, the film was picked up by distributors who recognized its broad comedic appeal. Because the humor relied heavily on visual storytelling and physical comedy, it translated easily across language barriers. This made it especially attractive to international markets, where dialogue-heavy films often struggled to gain traction without extensive dubbing or subtitles. In many countries, the marketing positioned the film as a feel-good comedy with an exotic and unusual premise. This framing was effective in attracting audiences looking for something different from standard Hollywood productions. The idea of a story set in the Kalahari Desert, featuring a protagonist unfamiliar with modern objects, was presented as both entertaining and unique. This sense of novelty played a major role in drawing audiences to theaters. Television advertising also contributed significantly to the film's visibility. Short clips emphasizing comedic moments, such as misunderstandings involving modern technology, were frequently used to capture attention. These snippets were carefully selected to be instantly understandable, even without context. The goal was to showcase the film's humor in a way that could be quickly communicated within a limited time slot, which was essential for television promotion. Print media, including newspapers and magazines, played a major role in shaping early audience expectations. Reviews and advertisements often focus on the film's originality and humor. Some promotional materials highlighted its international success in other regions, creating a sense of global popularity that encouraged curiosity among new audiences. This successful elsewhere strategy is a common promotional technique, and helped build momentum for the film's wider release. The film's distributor also benefited from the growing popularity of home video formats during the 1980s. As VHS technology became more widespread, The Gods Must Be Crazy found a second life in rental stores and home collections. This extended its promotional reach far beyond theatrical screenings. In many cases, audiences discovered the film not in cinemas, but through video rental recommendations or casual browsing, which became an important form of grassroots marketing. Word of mouth was perhaps the most powerful promotional force behind the film's success. Viewers who enjoyed the film often recommended it to friends and family due to its accessible humor and unusual premise. Because the film could be enjoyed without prior knowledge of its cultural or historical context, it was easy to recommend to a wide range of people. This organic spread of interest contributed significantly to its long-term popularity. The character of Andrew Stein, portrayed by Marius Weyers, and Kate Thompson, played by Sandra Prinsloo, were also featured in promotional materials, though often in a secondary role compared to She. Their presence helped communicate that the film was not only about a desert journey, but also about interactions between different types of people and environments. This broadened its appeal beyond a single comedic premise. International posters often emphasize visual contrast as a key marketing tool. Images would frequently show She in a natural desert setting alongside depictions of modern vehicles, buildings, or technology. This juxtaposition was designed to immediately communicate the central idea of cultural and technological difference. The simplicity of these visuals made them highly effective across different languages and markets. Another interesting aspect of the film's promotion was its positioning as both comedy and adventure. Rather than limiting it to a single genre, marketing materials highlighted multiple elements: humor, journey, and cultural encounter. This genre blending helped attract a wider audience, including those who might not typically watch pure comedy films. It also allowed distributors to place the film in different categories, depending on regional preferences. The timing of the film's release also contributed to its promotional success. During this period, audiences were increasingly interested in international cinema and stories set outside traditional Western urban environments. This growing curiosity helped the film stand out in a crowded marketplace. Its promotional messaging aligned well with this trend, emphasizing novelty and global storytelling. In some regions, the film's marketing leaned into its educational potential, suggesting that it offered insight into different ways of life. While this was not the film's primary purpose, it helped attract audiences interested in cultural exploration. This framing, however, also contributed to later discussions about how the film represented subjects, showing how marketing can influence interpretation. A comparative analysis of The Gods Must Be Crazy reveals how the film sits within a broader tradition of cross-cultural comedy, adventure storytelling, and fish-out-of-water narratives, while also standing apart due to its unique tone, production context, and narrative structure. When compared to similar films before and after its release, it becomes clear that its success is not only due to its humor, but also its distinctive approach to storytelling and cultural contrast. One useful point of comparison is earlier slapstick and silent-era comedy, particularly the works of filmmakers like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. These films also relied heavily on physical comedy, visual storytelling, and misunderstandings rather than dialogue. The Gods Must Be Crazy shares this foundation, especially in the portrayal of She, played by Anne Zaw, who navigates unfamiliar situations with physical expression and logical but non-conventional reasoning. Like silent film protagonists, she communicates primarily through action, making the humor accessible across language barriers. However, unlike early silent comedies, this film adds a strong cultural contrast between traditional and modern societies, giving a thematic depth beyond pure physical comedy. When compared to other cross-cultural comedies, such as Crocodile Dundee, the similarities become even more apparent. Both films rely on a character from a non-urban or less industrialized environment interacting with modern society and interpreting it in unexpected ways. However, The Gods Must Be Crazy places greater emphasis on environmental isolation and philosophical contrast, while Crocodile Dundee focuses more on personality-driven humor and romantic subplots. The desert world in The Gods Must Be Crazy is not just a backdrop, but a symbolic space that shapes behavior and worldview. In comparison to later films that explore similar themes, such as jungle-to-city narratives or modern culture clash comedies, The Gods Must Be Crazy often appears more observational and less self-aware. Modern films in this genre tend to explicitly comment on cultural differences, identity politics, or globalization. In contrast, this film presents its contrasts in a more indirect way, allowing humor and situation to carry meaning without overt commentary. This makes its tone feel both simpler and more ambiguous when viewed through a contemporary lens. The performances of Andrew Stein and Kate Thompson, played by Marius Weyers and Sandra Prinsloo, can also be compared to similar archetypes in romantic comedy and adventure films. Andrew fits the archetype of the socially awkward intellectual, a character type that appears in many later films. However, his awkwardness is amplified by the extreme contrast with She's worldview, making his behavior feel both familiar and exaggerated. Kate, on the other hand, resembles the pragmatic, grounded character often used to stabilize chaotic narratives. Compared to similar roles in other films, her character is less comedic and more observational, serving as a bridge between worlds rather than a source of conflict. In terms of thematic comparison, the film shares similarities with works that explore civilization versus nature. Films such as Dances with Wolves or Avatar also examine the tension between technological society and more traditional or ecological ways of life. However, The Gods Must Be Crazy approaches this theme with humor rather than epic drama or science fiction. Instead of focusing on large-scale conflict or emotional transformation, it uses small, everyday misunderstandings to explore how different systems of life interpret reality. Compared to political satire films, The Gods Must Be Crazy is more subtle and less direct in its critique. It does not explicitly target institutions or governments, even though it includes elements of authority and conflict. Instead, its critique emerges through contrast and irony. The presence of modern objects in a simple environment becomes a form of indirect commentary on materialism and technological dependence. This distinguishes it from more overtly satirical films that rely on dialogue-heavy critique or explicit political messaging. Another important comparison is with documentary-style films that depict indigenous or remote communities. While The Gods Must Be Crazy incorporates elements of realism in its depiction of the Kalahari Desert, it is ultimately a fictional comedy rather than a documentary. This difference is crucial. Documentaries aim to represent lived reality as accurately as possible, while this film uses simplified representation to support narrative and comedic goals. The character of She is therefore not a documentary subject, but a symbolic figure shaped by storytelling needs. When compared to modern global cinema, the film also reflects a different era of international filmmaking. Today's films often emphasize cultural sensitivity, consultation, and authenticity in representation. The Gods Must Be Crazy, produced in a different historical context, reflects earlier approaches to cross-cultural storytelling, where humor and contrast were prioritized over nuanced cultural accuracy. This difference is central to how the film is evaluated today, with contemporary audiences often balancing appreciation for its creativity with awareness of its limitations. The narrative structure itself can also be compared to anthology or multi-strand storytelling films. The parallel storylines of She, Andrew, and Kate create a layered structure that resembles ensemble films, though with a stronger focus on convergence. Unlike many ensemble films where characters remain separate, this film gradually brings all threads together in a single climax. This structural choice enhances the sense of collision between worlds, reinforcing the film's central theme. In terms of tone, the film occupies a unique position between comedy, adventure, and social observation. Few films maintain such a consistent lightness, while still engaging with deeper questions about society and human behavior. This tonal balance is part of what makes it difficult to categorize strictly within one genre. It is neither purely satirical nor purely comedic, but something that blends both approaches in a way that was relatively uncommon at the time of its release.